Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll give everyone a few moments to join us, and then we'll get started. All right, for everyone joining us today, hello, my name is Jasmine Mander. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the curatorial assistant here at the Art Gallery of Burlington. I'd like to start with a visual description of myself. So I have brown skin and dark brown, black shoulder length hair. It's currently pulled back in a bun. I'm wearing dark rimmed glasses and a black long sleeve top, and I'm in my living room with a large window behind me. So today's conversation is centered around the future, clay at the end of the world. But we can't dream about the future without first acknowledging the present and the past. So we are currently experiencing a heat wave here in what is now known as Burlington, Ontario. And we know that the climate crisis is directly linked to the ways we have harmed our environment. I would like to acknowledge that this is the unceded land belonging to the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Six Nations of the Grand River. This land is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Brant Tract Purchase, Treaty number 3 3/4 of 1795. I'm really looking forward to hearing from two members of the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts, NCECA's Green Task Force, who will share with us today solutions for implementing the reduce, reuse, recycle triangle in a clay studio to understand the environmental impact of artistic production and how to make changes in studio practices that will lessen the carbon footprint. So just to give everyone an overview of what the talk will consist of, it will be 30 to 45 minutes of a talk and presentation, and then we'll have 10 to 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or to use the Q&A feature. And closed captioning is also available at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you just click the three dots that say more, and then highlight the captions option and show captions. Last but not least, the AGB's code of conduct applies to this space, and it will be posted in the chat, and anyone displaying inappropriate behavior will be immediately removed. So please take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the code of conduct. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Suzanne Cart, our senior curator, who will introduce our speakers tonight.
Thank you, Jasmine. My name is Suzanne Cart. I'm the senior curator at the Art Gallery of Burlington. I am a white lady with big, messy gray hair today, and a black and white shirt, long earrings, and an equally messy apartment, as it seems. So, as Jasmine said, I'm joining from this very hot and steamy night. So I wanted to acknowledge that even though we didn't fly these fine folks into the AGB and we all didn't drive there tonight to be sitting in the gallery together, it doesn't mean that this is a net zero event, because there really is no such thing as net zero. The carbon footprint with our increased digital conversations and programming, a recent study that was supported by the MIT Energy Initiative found that 1 hour of streaming or video conferencing can emit anywhere from 150 to 1,000 grams of carbon dioxide, depending on the service. By comparison, a car produces about 8,800 grams of burning 1 gallon of gasoline. So that hour also requires about 2.5 liters of water in a land area the size of 4 by 8 inches. So as we at the AGB are turning off our camera to reduce our environmental footprint, which is about 96%. But a little bit of a backgrounder as to why we're here today is that over the last 40 years, the AGB has amassed the largest comprehensive collection of contemporary Canadian ceramics in the world, totaling over 4,000 works. So this year we celebrated an anniversary year with The Weight of Clay, an exhibition and programming series honoring the artists, the curators, the educators, volunteers, and donors who built the gallery's holding and contributed to the intellectual growth and ceramics in the country. The exhibition has a free programming series as a platform to investigate what the weight of clay truly is by looking towards the future sustainability of our studios in the climate changed world, reviewing the present pedagogies and practices, and delving into the past with discussions on history of where we have been and where we understand that we might be going. The AGB also has a spatial relationship to clay. Not only are we an institution that revolves around the preservation, exhibition, and education of clay-based arts, we're privileged to look out on the shores of Lake Ontario from our doors, and which serves as a daily reminder to give thanks and respect to the raw material we procure from the lands for artistic production, and to give thanks to the water bearers and the stewards for our ability to continue to make where we're at now. So this marks the first in our series of our future. We've gone the opposite ways: the future, the present, and the past. So the future is today, the future is now, with the clay at the end of the world, with Brian Kohl and Linda Swanson. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. So Brian Kohl is a ceramic artist and assistant professor of ceramics at Riverdale City College in Southern California. In the summers, he works as a whitewater rafting guide, currently in the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho. In his undergraduate studies, Kohl became aware of water issues in the West through a letter writing campaign of the Wilderness Heritage Act in California to designate 246 rivers in the state as wild and scenic. It was this catalyst that led him to research art as activism and paved a path for installations dealing with a number of dams in various states across the country. His work includes imagery from hydroelectric projects, pipes, and water fixtures juxtaposed against landscapes and natural worlds. Brian became involved with NCECA through presenting the conference programming and creation of the NCECA podcast. And this led to his role as the communications director at NCECA, the board of directors, from 2009 to 2013, and an active member of the Green Task Force since its inception in 2008. And Linda Swanson is an artist whose interests are grounded in the metaphoric nature of ceramic materials and processes. Her work engaged the enigmatic properties of matter at an elemental level and the capacity of wonder to question how and what we know. Her raw and kiln-fired ceramics have been exhibited in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, and Asia. She's been the artist in residence at the European Ceramic Center in the Netherlands, the Goldiger Gaard International Ceramic Research Center in Denmark, and most recently at the Louisiana State University. Her work has been supported with grants in various Canadian granting agencies, the Concordia University, where she currently teaches and coordinates the ceramics program. Swanson studied ceramics at the Tetsuki workshop in Osio, Japan, and earned a BA in art history from UC Santa Barbara and a BFA in ceramics in Cal State. So I would like to, it's also been part of the NCECA Task Force recently in 2021. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. We have a few images to share, so maybe I'll see how the slideshow is working, and then we'll launch into images of our work and images of other artists who are working with ideas of sustainability through their work, as well as some practical information about how we are thinking about and sharing information about sustainability in the studio. Let's see how this is working.
That looks perfect, Linda.
Great.
And something that I've not heard happen before on a Zoom, which I thoroughly, I think is an excellent idea, is I haven't heard people introduce themselves, but then say how they look. So I'm gonna follow along suit with that. I am a white man. I don't have much hair on my head, but I have a beard. It is a red beard, but there's a lot of white that's creeping in and will continue to creep in for the remainder. And I'm coming from my office here at Riverside City College. The background is blurred, and it's blurred because I don't have a very pretty office.
Brian, I'll follow suit. And I'm Linda Swanson, and I'm a middle-aged white woman who has shoulder-length hair and black rim glasses. I'm in my home office in front of a photograph that is of a field in the Netherlands.
So yeah, I guess we could get started with just a kind of a brief history about the NCECA Green Task Force. And the slide that's up right now is just the logo that we created many, many years ago. And the Green Task Force was originally an idea from one of our presidents of NCECA. His name is Robert Harrison. And he came up with this idea of creating a task force because his work was dealing with sustainability within the field, and thought that it was something that needed to be brought to the forefront of the conference, and how we looked at conferences and how we chose sites and how we chose convention centers based on the practices that they have within sustainability. And also something that's listed there on that image or on that slide is our website, our website address, which is NCECA GTF.com. So it's NCECA GTF.com. And that's one of the recent things that we've been doing or that we've done is come up with a pretty robust website that shares, here's an image of what the website looks like once you get there. And there's a number of tabs that are up top that have to do with, studio practices, clay material and water, firing, carbon footprint, educational. That's basically the tabs that we've come up with so far. And if you were to click on any of those, then it could take you to various links that could be videos, they could be other websites, they could be individuals that are working within each one of these realms. And we're constantly searching for new content to be able to put on there. And we consider ourselves kind of like, for NCECA, a hub of individuals that are interested in these practices. And we want to be able to give these resources that we've heard about for so long. And we each have our own, kind of area of expertise, if you will, or things that we're interested in. And so we try and bring that stuff to the forefront. And then we also have a group, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, but a group of a growing group of volunteers as well that are becoming a part of what we are doing as the Green Task Force, to be able to bring more and more resources to artists and gallerists and teachers and professors of and basically anyone that's involved in the ceramic process.
It is a great description, Brian. And so this website is really a platform for sharing information. The Green Task Force hasn't had the infrastructure to be able to generate new information yet, but we're trying to put it all in one place as a kind of centralized resource. And we also really want to invite submissions if you have some techniques that you've developed towards sustainability that we can also link to through this site.
And and I can put it in the chat as well. My personal email is what I pretty much use for in a lot of the NCECA stuff. But I operate as like the communications person for the Green Task Force right now. We're in the process of kind of changing a little bit of our structure, and we've come up with kind of some people have specific roles, and that's where kind of one of the things where I lie. And I can get people's information out to our volunteer like kind of one of our volunteer coordinators that leads the volunteer meetings that we have every month. So we meet as a task force, we meet on every third Friday of the month. And then directly following is when that volunteer meeting starts. And that's one of the things that we hope to do even with the website, is maybe have a place where we have a contact us form, but that goes to a general email, but maybe a way that we can have people kind of sign up or have it posted essentially on the website when those meetings happen, so that people can join a little bit more easily. How it's happened in the past is that an invitation goes out and then people sign up through, I think it's an Eventbrite, like kind of login. So that way we know what kind of, how many folks will be essentially having in those discussions. And that's for anyone at any point in time, and no necessary commitment to be a part of those meetings. And so we want to be able to open this up so that everybody can be involved.
Right, and there's no NCECA membership required either. So if you're just interested in this topic, you can join those volunteer meetings, and we'll show you a list of the upcoming topics at the end of our presentation here. What you see in the image here is a picture of the booth that was at NCECA this past year that had some studio solutions towards saving water and towards saving packaging, and some strategies for saving materials in the studio. So we are available at each conference to talk with folks who want to engage in these discussions. Another activity that we had at NCECA this past year was an exhibition of members of the Green Task Force. And with that exhibition, like the AGB, we had some values of sustainable exhibition practices, such as the pedestals were all reused from former exhibitions. They were sanded as their treatment rather than painted and repurposed. Many of the artists were working at a smaller scale or reducing their firing temperature in order to save energy. And when possible, the artists brought the work with them rather than shipping it separately. One of our members charted with one of his research assistants all of the carbon emissions that were related to the exhibition. And it seems that in the end, it was the flights to the location that ended up being the highest impact.
And it was a very interesting kind of, there was like a map of the essentially of the US and showed kind of the paths that everybody took to get there and how their work got there versus how the person got there. So that was also a very interesting aspect to, being transparent in having an exhibition dealing with sustainability within ceramics, but then also, letting people know we know what we're doing. We know that we traveled to get here and to have this exhibition. And we just want to be honest about what it is that we're doing.
And if you're curious about how those calculations happened or how you might calculate some of your own output, those calculators are also linked to on the NCECA Green Task Force site.
And it was really interesting too, a couple of people that were in the show. Well, one person actually made their work there with clay that was local from Ohio, that was brought in from one of our Green Task Force members. They were from California, the artist, but they decided that they wanted to make their work in the gallery with the clay that was local clay from Ohio that was basically dug, very, very locally. Not like local in terms of from a local clay supplier, but locally dug and processed.
So we thought we'd talk about the issues related to sustainability in ceramics through some artworks. Brian will start with his work, and I'll show a few, and then we have some other artists in the working in the field. But I think we're all becoming aware of the limited nature of material. Just this past year, Gersley borate seems to have gone out of production and gotten quite expensive and rare. Cornwall stone has stopped being mined. EPK is difficult to get a hold of. And some of these beloved and relied upon materials in the ceramic studio are becoming difficult to access. In addition to that, there's quite a movement towards local clay and local materials. And there's also issues around that with land rights, particularly indigenous land rights. And so there's these are complicated issues, and not with a single solution, but we're hoping that the more that we reach out and the more steps that are taken in this direction, the faster we'll all be able to get there.
And just really quickly, talking about the materials also, on the website, there's a very interesting kind of interactive map that allows you to search for a material and then find out where that material comes from and also where that material is processed. And this is something that I've recently started to get interested in, is how we get all these materials that we're using as ceramic artists and where they come from. And a lot of that came from my work in Idaho and finding out that there was a new cobalt mine that was going in there. But then in going to the cobalt mine and speaking with the manager or the main guy in charge there, he was saying that they're mining the cobalt in Idaho, but then they're sending it in shipping containers over the ocean to go to like Brazil to be processed, to then come back to the United States to be used and marketed as a US product. So there's not a lot of necessarily transparency through some of those people that are in those industries. But if you are interested in seeing where some of your materials come from, you can use that interactive map to kind of take a look and see essentially, and then make an educated or knowledge-based decision on whether or not you want to use some of those materials in your craft. So this piece here is a relatively recent piece that I made. And I started to use a bit more mixed media in some of my work just to get kind of the imagery, what it was that I'm interested in. This is a piece that's just about water issues. And one of the things that I've found through my research on water issues is that there's this, there's a connection between, in the United States anyways, a connection between water and electricity. Because of hydroelectric power. And I know that there's hydroelectric power elsewhere, but I'm primarily have been researching stuff here in the US. And so that's where the imagery comes from, is that's why there's pipes, the way in which water comes to us. And then there's and then kind of those pipes are maybe used as a conduit essentially for electricity as well, because electricity comes from that water and how it moves through those dams. And then something interesting that I've learned through my research as well is that here in the US, I can't remember who said this or who coined this, but it was in a recent book that I read, that basically if you want to save water, turn your lights off. And if you want to save electricity, don't run your faucet for longer periods of time, because it's like this inverse kind of interesting thing to me that seems like, okay, well, if I don't want to waste water, maybe I can, stop running the water quite as much. So it was just kind of an interesting thing that I discovered in my research. I think somebody in the chat just asked something about dimensions. This is maybe about 18 to 20 inches wide, something around that for the porcelain portion of it, and then slightly larger for the drip portion that's down below, and then it's probably about 8 to 9 inches tall. This is the piece that I presented for our NCECA Green Task Force show that we had at the same time as NCECA. And this piece is a piece about land issues. A lot of my work deals with water, but this was my first installation piece that I did dealing with land. There's 50 of these kind of nondescript orbs or egg shapes that have topographic lines on each one of them. And there's 50 of them because we have 50 states in the US, or 50 main states, if you will, in the US. And so the idea behind this was to just have a visual representation of each of those 50 states. And with my installation work, what I tried to do is have information available for people, or have some sort of activism available for people to take part in a like kind of accompanying the exhibition. And so because this wasn't a standalone installation, it was with a group show, I ended up partnering with the Nature Conservancy of Ohio, and had a QR code that was part of my piece, where people could donate directly to the Nature Conservancy Ohio. The map that's down below is a specific portion of a natural area that's in Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati where the conference was, just to tie this object to a place. And it's an area that they've been actively working on conserving for the last 80 years. So they're continually trying to, get land grants and essentially buy out people that have private land in the area so they can turn the land back into what it once was. But I ended up raising about $1,700 US for the Nature Conservancy Ohio through the show. And so that's one of the things that I'm very interested in through my work is how can I make some sort of a difference in some way? And sometimes that's through letter writing campaigns. Sometimes it's through petitions at various exhibitions that I've had, or in this case, it was through a direct donation to the Nature Conservancy Ohio. And this is part of a cup series that I do, again, focused around water. The main body of these little whiskey cups is our plumbing parts, 3-inch ABS plastic pipes, but then I slip cast those, or make the object the way that I want it, and then slip cast it, and then make the cups. And then I show imagery on these of engineering drawings of dams, which you can see here on the one on the right. And then each one has essentially a dam and a water fixture or some sort of a pipe or something like that associated with it. So I'm really interested too in using some transfer techniques that are that enable me to get a very graphic image on my work when it comes to the pottery work that I've been doing.
Okay, I've got a few pieces to follow, Brian. This is a piece called Seep, and it's an installation of raw powdered clay that's sifted onto a wooden platform. And up above, there's a membrane that holds water, and the water is slowly dripping and creating formations in the bentonite clay, which is expansive and swelling. I'm really hoping to draw these connections between the formations that look very biologic and also the nature of the materials that are geologic, as if to develop a kind of empathy for the land or for the kind of materials that we consider inorganic or inert in the world, and to see that they're have a certain energy and presence themselves that really relates to our own, as we see we're so interconnected. So with this exhibition, I had an exhibition in a nearby town. So this was in Milwaukee, and I had an exhibition in Chicago the following year. So the curator arranged for all of the residue from this exhibition to be brought to Chicago, and then I remade the installation in Chicago using those materials a second time. So where I can, I reuse these materials. If I can't reuse them, then I donate them to a ceramic program in a school that's nearby. And all of the installation materials are donated to a sculpture program, the wood, the metal that comprises the platform. So all of those things have a second life, and they don't end up going into the landfill. The other benefit of this practice, which I didn't really realize, I didn't kind of design it into this practice, but there's no shipping involved of the work in advance. So I'll go to a site and have a list of materials that I obtain from local suppliers, and create the exhibition on site out of those materials. And so nothing is being shipped. This is another piece that is comprised of water and clay, and it's a piece that transforms over time like the other. So there's this experience of the material and the transformation inherent to it that's very much like or parallel to the firing process, except in this case, the water is the transformative element. So there's no energy, kind of external energy involved. There are times when I do fire my work, though, admittedly. And this was a public art piece. And it was maybe the most imperceptible public art piece. It's made of 1,000 tiny slugs. They're about 2 or 3 inches long, and they were positioned to slither in from the canal, Lachine Canal in Montreal. This is a very polluted canal. And so part of the idea was that these slugs would kind of bring attention to this area and relate to these former stories of, kind of early proto-scientific stories of the origin of life popping out of putrid bodies of water. And so there was this kind of relationship with the canal that way. But it was a very interactive piece for the community to get involved in the ideas of the project. I invited the public to come at the end and to collect the slugs and to then further infest the city and further. So the leftover glazes that I had from these slugs, because they were all kind of individually glazed with different glazes, I then incorporated into another series of work that I called Calefactum, which were these small-scale tiles with basically experiments with those other glazes. So rather than throwing out the glazes or mixing them all together in one big pot, which is often done in studios, I kept them separate. I dried them out. And then when I needed them, I just rehydrated them like a kind of watercolor palette in order to make this series. So reducing waste is one of the primary strategies that we have as studio artists to improve the sustainable aspects of our practice. And the lowering the firing temperature or not firing at all is also another possibility, like this work by Yewen Dong, which is a work that is evolving as it's set up. So these are basically stripes of raw clay that, as she progresses in making the painting, are drying at the same time. And she has made a stop motion animation video about this work. And then the work that's shipped is actually that video, or transferred is that video. And there isn't really a physical residue that is needing to be shipped.
And this, I mentioned Robert Harrison before, this is one of the people that has been involved in the Green Task Force since its inception, and he was the one that kind of, sometimes I like to talk about him as like the father of the Green Task Force. This is a piece that he made for an exhibition where the materials are that are within this structure are all pieces that were mined essentially from a shard pile in at the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena, Montana, where Robert lives outside of Helena, Montana. And so this is basically like he's well known for making these arch type structures, and he started to like kind of upcycle and repurpose a lot of material in some of these things that he makes, and this is one of those examples. All ceramic materials and bricks and those sorts of things that are in that, it just mined from that single shard pile.
In a similar vein, Bouc de Vries is reusing broken pieces or broken porcelain in this case to create an entirely new sculpture. So he has a background in restoration and conservation and has reused or kind of redirected those skills towards his own artwork now. And these pieces by Katrine Kisterholz are actually mined from the trash clay and glaze at the University of Oslo and repurposed into this work. She also accompanies her work with writing. So there's this dual practice of both the physical object and the written description of the process. Similarly, Sarah Howard has recently published a book called Circular Ceramics, which is on the right there. And there's a link to it through her Instagram account. And part of her practice is meeting industry and bringing waste materials from industry that are byproducts that can't be recycled as part of those industries into her ceramic production. And these images, though, are from a project that she did in Bali, where the glass for the glaze was harvested from debris that was thrown into the river, and other materials were coming from industry, like those marble cuttings. The sludge from the saw then was recycled into the ceramics. So some of the materials that we can potentially use in ceramics don't necessarily have to come from natural origins. They can be part of this industrial byproduct if it's safe to use those materials and they don't have other toxicities associated with them. I added in this piece by Julia Galloway because I found it really important that she was working on substituting materials. So she was looking at the information like Brian was describing in terms of that material map, and has substituted in her porcelain a domestic kaolin for a international kaolin or English kaolin, just to reduce that number of miles that the materials are traveling in order to get to her studio initially. So even in your recipes, one material, another material, slight substitutions can really start to cut down on the carbon footprint of the total.
And this is work by an American artist named Josh Kopis. This is all wild clay. He wood fires. I think it's, if I remember right, he's in North Carolina. But he's constantly, because he's well known in the wild clay community out here, that he gets calls from people saying, hey, like we found this clay deposit inside of this, cut that we're working on. Yeah, like, do you want to come and pick it up? And he'll show up and he'll with the back of his pickup truck and have people just, have a backhoe just filling up the back of his pickup truck so he can have material. And then he takes it back to his studio, refines it the way that he needs to be able to make it turn it into a usable product. And that's where the colors from a lot of this comes from, is just the different types of local clays that he's working with, without really, he's adding obviously some things to it to make it a workable clay body. But there's quite a bit of change from one clay source to the other, depending on where he's getting it from.
I think we've experienced that idea of local clay and community also at Concordia, where we've been trying to catalog local clays in Quebec, and we put the word out through our networks at school, and we keep getting buckets arriving. My office is full now of buckets that are arriving with various samples from around Quebec. It's so interesting. You find that somebody is digging out their basement and found clay, or there's a new landfill being developed and they're digging the pit and there's clay available. So as soon as you start mentioning this, there starts to be a kind of growing energy around the idea of kind of sharing this material and finding it. And it's another way that I think community can grow around our medium. Along those lines, Nina Cassina has recently published a book called Un Argila, where she has been sampling local clays and putting them into this very, very simple form of a globe, and juxtaposing those objects with the imagery of where the clay originated. And
this is Sine Kim. She has been, in order to create that, I'm not sure exactly the total process that went into this, but she's now working with scientists essentially, and making glaze out of human waste urine. And the way I understand it is that it is distilled to make it into a thicker product that can be used as a glaze. And so the exterior of this glaze, this is just from the mineral content that's found in human urine after concentrating it through distilling. Now I'm going to we'll get into a little bit of like studio things that we can do to make a change within our own studios. I am teaching at a community college, which is a 2-year school. We probably have about 140 students that come through the ceramic program. So in our this has kind of been adapted from another system that I learned from a woman by the name of Liz Duarte about using like a 4-bucket, like 5-gallon bucket system to wash your glaze materials, like any of your glaze tools, glazed brushes, glazed tongs, paddles, stir sticks, whatever it happens to be. But I've adapted it into a 10-gallon buckets and only using 3 of them. And it's been working out really well so far. The first one is where you do all of your cleaning, and then you just dip into the number 2 and the number 3. And then over time, like basically about once a week, we clean out the number 1 bucket. So we'll decant the water off of it using a pump system. And then get it down to where there's a lot less water that's inside of there and get down to the sludge that's at the bottom. We'll start doing it in the morning before anybody stirred it up. And then that smaller bucket that's on the far left-hand side of this, we take all that leftover material that's all glazed waste. It never went in, it doesn't go down our plumbing systems. But we save that and then turn it into a glaze that I call it sustainability surprise. And that sustainability surprise glaze it's coming out really beautiful right now. It's like an olive green color. It's very, it's stable. It's not running all over the place, which is awesome. On occasion, you might have to make some adjustments to it depending on how your glaze is coming out. But for the most part, it creates a really beautiful glaze. And then the number 2 and 3 bucket don't get emptied out. They just get moved over. So the number 2 bucket becomes the number 1. The number 3 bucket becomes the number 2. The cleaned out number 1 bucket then becomes the clean number 3 bucket. And then you just continue on in that over the course of the semester. And we're able to recuperate quite a bit of our glaze material and make a really beautiful glaze out of it. And I've started to glaze a ton of my work that way. And then along the same lines of reusing stuff, we have a lot of waste that's left at the end of the studio, at the end of the semesters. And anything that's left over, we save that. If it's been fired, we save that material, put it into boxes, and then we've been doing it once a year, but we're probably going to start doing it once a semester. We have a clay club event. We have a clay club on campus. We have a clay club event where we invite students from the whole college and classified personnel and faculty members and administrators to come into the ceramic studio and to choose a piece, glaze it. And if they want to do the most sustainable option, they can use the sustainability surprise glaze to glaze those objects and give them a new home, because students leave that work behind. And instead of it ending up in a landfill or having to figure out how you could recycle an already made object, you can turn it into an item that anyone can use in their house. And we do that it's by donation. So, you could come in and do it. And if you don't have money to donate, you can have a free item and leave with a free item. So it's a really good way of getting rid of and giving a new home to items that are left behind at the end of the year. And we also save the made items that haven't been fired yet. And we have a pretty aggressive clay recycling program. We started out this semester after the summer semester with 68 bags of 25-pound bags of recycled clay that were given out. So a lot of the first projects that are made by students are made out of the recycled clay, and we give that away to students rather than charging for it. And then we also have, purchased clay or bagged clay that comes from a local clay supplier.
Along those lines, I just saw this great idea from the Alfred Grinding Room, which was this limited edition of recycled clay. The recycled porcelain had a colored grog added, and then the mid-range stoneware had some of the glaze waste, like Brian's describing, that was recycled from those bins, added in as the flux. So it's a kind of limited special edition run of these materials that kind of makes it special, and then it gets used to its fullest.
I'm super jealous of the Harvard studio. They also have like a rock crusher, so they can actually crush their already fired glazeware or greenware to turn it into grog, or to turn it into a material that can then be reused. That's something that I'd really like to get here at my college at some point in time. These two bins are something that I just recently started and I'm experimenting with. The left one is filled with clay waste. When I came into the studio here 3 years ago, was right after quarantine, where basically everybody who was a ceramic studio at student at Riverside City College, they basically were kind of forced to leave the studio, and they never really got a chance to come back to get any of the work that they had made. And we had a point in time where we allowed people to come back and get the things that they needed. But what I ended up doing, because this was all cone 10 clay, the college was firing at cone 10. I've since lowered the firing temperature here to cone 6. So this is all this leftover cone 10 clay that I've collected and then reconstituted, slaked down, and then put into these pretty large scale troughs from one of the local hardware store. But then I made these lids to enable me to dry these materials out without getting a bunch of organic material inside of them. So the lid has kind of a two-step process. If you close that flap that's on the right one, then it can kind of stay at its regular consistency, and it's almost not totally sealed, but pretty sealed. There's a weather stripping seal that's on the interior of the wood portion. But then the hinge lid can be opened, and then it's just like screen material that's there that allows that organic material to stay out, so I don't get a bunch of big leaves and things like that in there. So the one on the right is open right now because there's a lot more water in the glaze materials, and that's filled with all of our old cone 10 glazes that were left over from us switching over. I'm going to be doing a little bit of experimentation this semester and coming up with there's a way that you can take the sludge and mix it about 50-50 and then fire it at a lower firing temperature, somewhere maybe around cone 1 or maybe even lower, to be able to just once fire a piece of work. You can make objects out of it. It's not the most plastic clay body of any kind, but you can press it in, push it into press molds, make paver tiles that are relatively robust. You can have it be a pretty thick item, and then fire it slowly at around cone 1. But again, experimentation has to be done to make sure that it's proper. But this was one of my solutions to get rid of the just probably 1,000 pounds at least of old clay material, and probably even more weight than that of glazed material that's in the studio. And I have buckets of things ready to go into these once we're finished doing this. And we've recently, I serve on the sustainability committee on campus, and the sustainability committee has gotten some grant money through the college, through the president, I believe, to be able to make some, I've been approached about making basically a sustainable art piece that also could create habitat for animals. And so we're kind of researching some of that right now to try and figure out what kind of a habitat we could create for the animals that are present in our community, and how that art piece can serve as not only a beautiful object on campus and a history of the students that were a part of it, but also how can this actually create habitat for some birds or reptiles or whatever it happens to be that maybe needs a little bit more, is in need of housing essentially within these concrete cities that we're building all over the place. Okay,
well, the last topic we just wanted to touch on was firing. And I'm put up a picture here of Concordia's recent purchase of several Blau kilns, which are about 85% more efficient. So now there are materials in terms of insulation that can make kilns much more efficient. And the way we were able to get these kilns is through pitching their sustainable qualities to the administration. So just put that out there for anyone who might be part of an organization that has a sustainability mandate, or even just the kind of communal effort to come together around a piece of equipment that ends up replacing much more environmentally heavy equipment. On that note, in Quebec, we're trying to build a wood kiln to use wood as a renewable resource with this Girel 3E kiln design, which is a clean burning wood kiln. So all of the exhaust coming out of the chimney is gone through a double process of burning, and so there isn't any particulate coming out of the chimney. So stay tuned for that, because that's a project that we're looking to fund and get produced. And we wanted to walk away today with just a few really practical tips that you could take to the studio that we've mentioned through seeing these artworks and Brian's studio images. But the first one would be to reduce your water use. So think about how you might use buckets as rinsing vehicles so that the tap is running less. The second one is to reuse, see what you can reuse in your studio and feed back into the ceramic materials. So we talked about the glaze waste going back into clay bodies. You could also crush up failed work that has been bisqued into grog. And then remember to recycle not just the materials like the glaze waste, but all the things that you're using in the studio. And one thing that I read about in the Circular Ceramics book, which really blew my mind this past week, was the way to recycle plaster. So you have to get a hold of that book in order to do that, which I didn't even know was possible.
Man, and it's super easy.
Yeah, it's really not hard. So there are the NCECA Green Task Force community meetings that we mentioned earlier. The upcoming topics include, in September, reducing waste in community settings, which can be difficult to get everybody on board. In October, there's updating glaze recipes to limit toxic ingredients and energy use. November is alternative firings, and December is an open forum on the theme of water. How are you managing water use? And the group will share strategies and ideas.
And again, if you want to get involved in these community meetings, please send me an email and I'll get you to the right person, so that way we can get that Eventbrite invitation out to you, so you can come in and visit and see what we have to offer, essentially. And I'm going to leave you on one other note that I didn't take a picture of, but I have something here. No, it doesn't look right. Oh, there we go. We basically we don't allow any paper towel use in our studio either. And talking about reducing, we give every one of our students a terry cloth towel at the beginning of the semester, and they are to hold on to that towel and use it for drying their hands off in the studio, because we're drying our hands so often when we're making. And at the end of the semester, they turn them back in. We take them to a laundromat and wash them, and then we bring them out the next semester, and hope, obviously some kind of fall to the wayside and students don't have them at the end of the semester, but we get a good number of them back, and we can continue to reuse those until they essentially start to fall apart. And my hope is at some point in time to be able to get just a quick washer dryer system here in the studio, so that we don't have to take them off site to get the washing done. Maybe we can find somebody here in the community to donate something, so we can just have them here in the studio. That'd be great.
I think we still have a few minutes for questions, if there are any popping up.
I had a question for you, Linda, because I was I was at that show where you showed your piece with the bentonite. I
Mhm.
always wondered, and I've never asked you this, but what is the material that you use to hold on to the clay that that allowed it to like drip so slowly? Because I was all when I saw that piece, it was just like the beauty of how the water was in those um making that kind of conical upside down like conical form. That was one of the really interesting aesthetic parts of that piece to me.
Yeah, thanks to gravity.
Yeah.
It was ripstop nylon, which is the kind of fabric that tents are made out of. And it so happened that we had been camping the summer before in Iceland, and it was raining a lot, and we had to tell our daughter not to touch the tent because if you touch the tent, it leaks. So what I do is just touch the bottom of that fabric, and it starts to drip through the membrane.
Very cool.
So gravity paste.
I see a question here. Oh, the name of the plaster recycling book. Is that book just on plaster recycling, or is it?
Oh, no, it's
Yeah,
just
no.
one little segment in the book called Circular Ceramics. I'll type it in the chat. So you can look on Sarah Howard's Instagram, and there's a link there.
We also on I'd have to go to the website to see, I think it's under materials or something like that, but there's an article that was written by I think it was one of Julia Galloway's grad students or undergrad students that was all about dehydrating plaster and how to recycle it, because it's
Perfect.
recyclable indefinitely. That's the crazy part about it, is that you can essentially like basically put the items that you have that are made out of plaster and hold them at a relatively low temperature for a not long period of time, not like a whole kiln firing, but it's about 350 or 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and hold it there to dehydrate it. And then when you pull it out, it crumbles and it becomes very easy to turn it back into powder. So that's the short of it, essentially. And then there's a question on how do you communicate to students and hobbyists the importance of being selective in terms of firing works in your own school settings. That's a great question. I guess though, and Linda, you can speak to this as well, but with my students, I start out the beginning of the semester talking about all of these things that we do within the studio to reduce our impact on the environment and how can we become more sustainable. And I also talk to students about not becoming so tied to everything that they make, like be selective in the works that you're firing and take value in the fact that you created something, but if it's not exactly what you wanted it to be, or if it got a small crack in it, like, is that really something that you're going to want to use after it comes out of the kiln and goes through the entire firing process? And, if essentially letting students know that ultimately it's up to them to make that decision, just like it's up to them whether or not they want to print my syllabus. It's available online, but some people just want to have that paper copy, and then some people don't really care. And so letting people know, like, hey, if you're going to print something with your printer, like, be selective in what you print, but also as an artist with the items that you make, is this something that you want to hang around? And this is shortly after we have a discussion about how long ceramic materials last, and that the oldest ceramic item is like 33,000 years old. So do you want this item hanging around in the world for the next 33,000 years, or do you not want it hanging around? That can help you make that decision.
One of my early ceramics instructors used to stand at the kiln, and we had to pass him as he asked us, do you want this object to live in the world for the next 20,000 years or something, some crazy length of time? I don't do that with students, but I do implement exercises where we're remaking objects and reusing the clay, because I think students tend to get very precious about the things that they first initially make, and as opposed to investing in an object that they make and to be sure that they really want to keep it. So we'll do exercises in class that just everything gets wedged right back up. So so there's that idea that that clay you know, is reusable until we want it to be permanent.
I'm reading what Natalia wrote here. So
And I believe that there was a question here in regards to a Quebec company that used to exist called Cell. And the person wonders whether or not it still exists.
So I'm not sure I understood.
yeah,
Right, many years ago, when I lived in Quebec, there was a company called Sale that made its own clay from deposits in Quebec. Does it still exist?
Ciel, right. So Ciel does not have any local clay products anymore. The only clay that they have that's Canadian is coming from Plainsman Clay in Alberta. So they used to produce a local clay, but they don't anymore. We need to put some pressure on these suppliers, I think, as consumers, even though ceramics isn't the hugest group using many of these materials. For a clay supplier like Ciel, which is our local clay supplier, certainly if there were enough of us asking for a local clay to be mixed into a clay body, we might be able to get it. So I'll join forces with you.
And one thing I didn't mention, but then it just came to me essentially about how we deal with, or how I deal with students and you know, not firing objects. I don't always ask for, like, I want my students to be making objects, but I've really minimized the number of projects that really have to be fired. You know, they need to, a student needs to show in at least in the junior college set or the community college setting, that they've reached the student learning outcomes that we have for each one of the courses. And none of those, so you can actually change your curriculum if it's possible to not include numbers of like, you need to be able to show that you can make, you know, 10 or 20 cylinders that are X size, you know, like that could be something that they strive for, to be able to come up with the cylinder, but then that curriculum can be written differently so that it doesn't include numbers, essentially. So that way you're not, and I have my students, they have to show me that they've thrown, for a beginning class, that they throw 10 cylinders when they first start out throwing. But I tell them that they don't even have to fire any of them. You don't even have to have one that's fired. I can look at all of those 10 cylinders as greenware and they can show me that they've learned how to lift the cylinder and get it. And I don't ask for a specific height either, but just to be able to demonstrate that they can lift that clay upwards and kind of help it defy gravity and have an inside wall that's straight, you know, like 90 degrees, and a flat bottom and flat, you know, straight sides on the exterior. But it's up to them whether or not they're going to glaze those objects. It's not part of the grade. And so when it's not part of the grade, students don't always tend to do that, because that's extra work, unless they're tied to something really emotionally that they made. And then that could, you know, pique their curiosity or pique their interest in firing it.
Yeah, we definitely introduce raw clay as a viable artistic means in our program too. We have a question from Heather that says, more of a curiosity, because here in Burlington, we are seeing a burden on availability and supply lines for clay and raw materials. Are you finding this near you as well? It does seem since the pandemic, there's been some inconsistency in supply. So we definitely are, and they're in the ceramics industry as a whole. I mentioned some of those more beloved and relied upon materials that are becoming unavailable, and we're searching for alternatives.
Yeah, and I just recently, last week, I went and picked up a new kaolin that we have available. That's a US kaolin to hopefully replace EPK for us, because at my local supplier, EPK hasn't been available since like April.
Right.
And yeah, and there's not even knowledge as to what's happening, from what I can understand. Like, nobody knows what's happening at that mine. And you know, if there's in some sort of an issue or a lawsuit that was associated with, like, no, there's no information that's out there at all from what I can gather as to why EPK is not shipping any longer. And I think EPK's mine is in Florida, so it's a relatively close, in terms of on the continent, to most of us. So, but this other one is, I can't remember where it comes from, but I think the difference in it is that it has 2% more alumina. And so I was suggested by the material kind of person at Aardvark Clay and Supply here in California, is to test it with one of our glazes that uses the most EPK. And then so that's what I bought a small amount of it so we could start doing a little bit of testing and see if we can move over to that kaolin rather than having to deal with that. And that's one of the things that I think I like about ceramics as well, is that we're constantly having to change some of these things. Even when ashes become not as readily available, and it's a new ash, volcanic ash or something like that. And then, all of a sudden you have these changes. And years ago, there was that problem with Gerstley borate, but then a lot of our local suppliers here, like Laguna and Aardvark Clay and Supply, they came up with like a synthetic version of Gerstley borate that worked pretty well, like they just kind of broke it down chemically material wise to find out what was in it. But there's these trace minerals or materials that are in that. And recently I heard from somebody that you could just take the synthetic borates and grab a little like small handful of like dirt essentially off the ground and just throw that in. And if you throw that in, that may give you those extra trace minerals that were missing from that Gerstley borate, which is kind of interesting because I guess it depends on where you live and what are those trace minerals that you're picking up off the ground that you sweep up, who knows.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Linda and Brian, for this. I realize that there's two things. One, I really need to see sustainability surprise. And that two, I feel like
you want to grab it real quick?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay.
That, and then the other thing is that I need a rock crusher in my life. I don't know why. As soon as you said that, it was like, yes, I need a rock crusher. So, and then to also to the motto that that Kirsty Robinson says from the Center for Curatorial Sustainability at Western University, where you have the show, is that she always says, if you're going to make it count. Ooh, look at
This
that.
is what it looks like. It's hard to see, but there's little small flecks of cobalt that's inside of it as well.
So nice.
And then it's a transparent glaze, so it interacts with a lot of our, let me turn off this. It's hard, I can't. Oh, there we go. It interacts with a lot of our slips in a different way, obviously showing them, being able to look through that green lens and see those colored slips as well. But there's all like colors of the rainbow essentially that are underneath there, but it's hard to see them because they're underneath there, right? But it's a really pretty glaze, and it's wildly stable. It doesn't run at all. It's like one of our most stable glazes.
Special edition.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I will see you later.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions as well. Hopefully we'll see you at a community meeting in the future. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.